In a moment, we'll bring in the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janiin Pirro, who's been stepping up efforts to bring down crime here in the nation's capital amid protests and backlash. But first, let's get to Fox News correspondent Lucas Tomlinson at the White House. Lucas.
Shannon, in his post, President Trump called Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker weak and pathetic. And if Trump does order the National Guard into Chicago, the city's mayor has ordered the police not to cooperate.
We have received credible reports that we have days, not weeks, before our city sees some type of militarized activity by the federal government.
During the president's last public appearance Tuesday, he hinted Chicago could be next.
Everybody knows Chicago is a hellhole right now. I'm willing to go to Chicago.
After deploying more than 2,000 National Guard and federal law enforcement agents to the streets of the nation's capital, reducing violent crime by 30%, according to the White House, the president thinks this model could be repeated in other big cities. One of his top aides put it this way.
It's a simple choice. You either side with civilization or you side with anarchy and violence.
Not everyone is on board. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says while he welcomes more federal agents, including the FBI, he does not want soldiers on Chicago's streets.
You call up the National Guard when you have an emergency. There is no emergency here.
Governor Gavin Newsom says he's ready to deploy what he calls suppression teams from the California Highway Patrol to reduce violence.
Crime's an issue and we want to tackle it. We're not talking about the nationalization, the militarization of the Guard and militarizing United States cities.
At first, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser scoffed at the idea of President Trump taking over the D.C. police force.
This doesn't make sense. The facts on the ground don't support this.
She provided an update a week later.
We greatly appreciate the surge of officers. The difference between this period, this 20-day period of this federal surge and last year represents a 87% reduction in carjackings.
The White House says since those reinforcements have been sent to the streets of the nation's capital, there's been over 1,300 arrests and over 140 illegal guns taken off the streets. Shannon?
All right, Lucas Tomlinson reporting from the White House. Thank you very much, Lucas. Joining us now, Janiin Pirro, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Welcome to Fox News Sunday. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Shannon.
Okay, so let's start here. On the way out the door, here's what your predecessor said about how things were going in D.C. Total violent crime for 2024 in the District of Columbia is down 35% from 2023 and is the lowest it has been in over 30 years. So how do you respond to critics who say this is way too heavy-handed? You know, people in uniforms on the streets looking militarized here in D.C. It's an overreaction. It's a distraction.
You know, what's interesting about this, Shannon, is that President Trump has literally changed the safety landscape in Washington, D.C. And I often wonder, in answer to your question, whether, you know, who is the person who says, you know, crime is low enough for us to handle? Who decides what is acceptable? If we go from intolerable to unacceptable, does that mean we should pat ourselves on the back and say, let's just leave town? No, that's not what President Trump is about here. Washington was one of the most violent cities, not just in the United States, but in the world. So let's not pussyfoot around this whole thing. We've got individuals who are being shot, stabbed, beaten, and brutalized, and arrests are not being made. In the last year and 8 months, 45 black teenagers, minority teenagers, have been shot and killed with firearms. You know what the clearance rate is, Shannon? The clearance rate, meaning how many cases have been solved, is 29%. That means that 70% of the murderers of African-American teens, all of them killed with guns, are still out on the street with their guns, continuing to do what they do. And so for all those people who say, oh, crime is down, isn't this great? That's nonsense. What we need is to recognize that the first order of government is the protection of its people. And President Trump is willing to make sure that D.C. has the resources, that D.C. has the determination, and all of us, both in the United States Attorney's Office, are doing the best we can to put together the most solid cases. And so far, we've had 1,500 28 arrests, 156 guns taken off the street, which means they can't be used to shoot and kill other people. Last night alone, 76 arrests, 5 guns seized. If anyone has a problem with that, then, they're not in compliance with 81% of the American people who think crime is a major problem in large cities.
Yeah, well, I'm curious as to what you found when you walked into this new position as U.S. Attorney in the office here in D.C., because all of these things have to work together. The men and women in uniform on the streets, they're out there, they're trying to put together cases. They bring them to you as prosecutors. You've got the mayor. How was all of that working together, and have you made significant changes?
Look, the most important thing we can do, Shannon, is work together. And I am working together with all my partners in Washington. This is about crime. This is about protecting the public. They talk about the shining city on the hill. Well, this shining city on the hill is upside down. And President Trump is doing everything he can to reorient it to be that shining city on the hill. And what that means for me, when I came in, I found a D.C. council laws that protected and coddled young people. If you're 15, 16, or 17 years old and you shoot someone but they don't die, I can't prosecute you. You go to family court where you end up being, the purpose is rehabilitation. And you've got carjackings. It's like up, 200% in a short period of time. And then these young kids, they're punks. They end up torching the cars afterwards. And I can't prosecute them. I can't arrest them. We've got a D.C. Court of Appeals that issues decisions that are so out of line with even the Supreme Court, and judges sentencing people for possession of illegal guns and letting them go. I had a 19-year-old who shot someone on a public bus with an illegal gun. The judge, under the D.C. law, gave the person probation and said, why don't you go to college? This has to be changed, and we've got our work cut out for us. And I am determined, with the prosecutors in my office, to work with the police. My prosecutors are working around the clock in this surge. We are working with the police to put together these cases to make sure that when they go to court, they get a conviction and that there is a sentence that is consistent with the acts that are occurring. If President Trump didn't do this, Washington would continue to be one of the most violent cities in the world, and anyone who is against it is about politics and not about safety for our fellow citizens.
So you talk about getting to court, getting your prosecutors together and getting these cases together, but here's the headline from the Washington Post just days ago. It said D.C. judges and grand jurors push back on Trump policing surge. There's at least one high-profile case where they're making a lot of headline news about the fact that you couldn't get a grand jury to indict. So how does that factor into what you're trying to do?
Well, clearly, I know the case that they're referencing, and there's not a lot I can talk about in terms of grand juries, but what I can tell you is this. There are a lot of people who sit on juries and they live in, they live in Georgetown or in Northwest or in some of these better areas, and they don't see the reality of crime that is occurring. And my office has been instructed to move for the highest crime possible, consistent with the law, the statute, and the evidence. And in that one case, in that particular article, we were on point. But the grand jurors don't take it so seriously. They're like, whatever. And my job is to try to turn that around and to continue to give the support that my prosecutors need. In that case, we took it as a misdemeanor, and we'll go forward with it. The fact that they're so used to crime, that crime is so normalized in D.C. that they don't even care about whether or not the law is violated, is the very essence of what my problem is in D.C. And that is to turn this ship around, as President Trump has directed, so that the people in D.C., the minority community who are hurt the worst by crime, who are crying for help, are finally heard. And that's what I'm there to do, and that's what my job is. And I don't really care about these people who say, we don't need you or you're going too hard. My job is to protect the victim. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to make the criminal accountable. We've got to change that D.C. council. These statutes have called for a ceiling of convictions within 5 years. That means if you hire someone, you're not going to find out whether or not they've been convicted of petty larceny or theft. Or if you have a dance class, you can't find out if the person applying is a pedophile. All of this is lunacy. and we're changing it. And it's not easy, Shannon.
No, there's a lot of work in a lot of big cities. And the president's talked about Chicago. There's a ton of resistance there, and them saying they're watching what's happening in D.C. Obviously, we're a federal district, so it's different than another city as far as some of what the president has the authority to do. But here's what Gavin Newsom says about what they're doing. He is doing crime suppression teams, but they'll use state officials, California Highway Patrol. Here's what he says.
He's doing things to people, not with people. It's a point of profound and consequential contrast. He's de facto militarizing American cities.
So to that point, President Obama also weighing in on X, saying this in part: expanding use of our military on domestic soil puts the liberties of all Americans at risk and should concern Democrats and Republicans alike. So what about those concerns?
You know, they're both laughable. President Obama to come out and make a comment on Chicago, a city that is his city, that has been one of the most violent cities in America, that has shootings and killings frequently since I can remember. Every weekend there's shootings in Chicago. What are they doing about it? What they're doing is they're turning to politics and they're turning to anything anti-Trump, as opposed to saying we want to join the president in his effort to protect the American people. We recognize and applaud President Trump for what he's doing. President Trump could sit back like they did and do nothing. But, the president is not doing something to the American people in these cities. He is protecting them. You speak to any of the crime victims that I speak to, any of the parents of murdered kids and teenagers, then you'll get a sense of how disappointed people are in these leaders who'd rather play politics. And when Muriel Bowser, the Democrat mayor of D.C., can say violent crime is down by 50% because of this surge, you want to criticize that? You want to say they don't deserve to come in and protect our people? We want our people to be victims of violent crime, and we don't care about it? Shame on them.
Well, we are glad that you and the mayor seem to have a very good working relationship. As somebody who's worked and lived in D.C. for 20 years, always happy to see crime numbers going down. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you. Bye.